Will Hadi Choopan ever win the Olympia again? Stay tuned for my opinion. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Welcome live. Ask Dave. We've been meaning to do this for quite some time, and this is exactly what we're going to do. This is going to be your Wednesday night question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. It's going to be the post-Olympia version of Ask Dave. So we're lining up questions now. We already have questions from our Instagram page, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app, from our YouTube community, from Facebook. But if you want to join in, you could join in on the live chat. If you have any questions, Olympia or whatever, diet, training, supplementation, we're opening up this forum to you. We may be doing more live versions of Ask Dave going forward, but we figured let's make this episode a little bit more of an Olympia flavor. So, but that said, we are going to start with the Dave Palumbo Experience app. That's Dave's app where he provides diet training guidance as well. Another live version of Ask Dave. Basically, it's your personalized coach in your pocket, in your phone. It's a great app and it's a great resource if you're looking for a coach and want to spend thousands in a given year. So we're going to take questions from there. First, the first question, what do you think of Skip Hill's training split? 1 day on, 1 day off.
You know, I actually don't really mind that. I know a lot of people like to go to the gym a lot of days a week. But you have to know what your metabolism is about. If you have a really fast metabolism, you have trouble gaining weight, 1 day on, 1 day off actually works pretty well because it kind of gives your body an extra day off a week. It kind of works out to like 3 or 4 days of training a week and 3 days off. Some weeks you'll do 4 days off, some days you'll do 3 days off. It's good for people who overtrain real easily. I never did something that extreme. I did it what I call an 8-day split. I would do 6 days of training, and then I would have 2 days off, and each body part got trained once every 8 days. I like that, but his thing is every other day you get a day off and you train each body part once a week as well. So it's functionally the same thing, but I didn't like to do 2 body parts on one given day. So I didn't like to have to do back and chest on one day or something like that, or arms and shoulders on one day. When you're only training 3 days a week, you have to combine body parts. And I found that it was too much volume for me on those days. Even though I had more days off to recover, I still thought the workouts were too long. So I preferred to do like one body part on a day. Remember that I was even prioritizing arms at one point where I was doing triceps on its own day and biceps and forearms on its own day. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can work around that. And once again, for people who have very busy schedules who maybe work every other day, this might work out perfectly. But to be honest with you, I would do 2 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off. And that worked really well for me. So as long as you're not taking too many days in a row of training, I think you're fine. But if you are an overtrainer and you have trouble recovering, and maybe if you're natural, you can try that every other day approach. I have no problem with it.
Second question, again, these two first question from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. I started using PEDs when I was 24 years old. I'm now 35. I've run some big cycles throughout my bodybuilding career. How long will I still be able to run cycles for, assuming my blood levels are good?
How long did he do it before?
So it's been about 11 years now. You started when he was 24.
You know, the problem with when you do a cycle, and this is my whole philosophy on cycling anabolic steroids. You know, a lot of people blast a lot of shit real fast and hard. They go orals and they hit it hard and they put a lot of muscle in it, and then they'll go off a cycle, okay, and rest, and then they'll hit it hard again. You know, some people hit it hard all the time and never go off, and those people usually have problems, right? Because they have, you know, they're going to have health problems. And then there are people who will do, you know, less toxic drugs, longer acting compounds for longer cycles, and then, you know, take a break. I'm of the belief of I like the third option because I like to use non-toxic, long-acting injectables like DECA, testosterone, you know, an anthocyanate, EQ, even the trenbolone and anthate ester is good because it's long-acting. And I like to switch them around every 6 to 8 weeks, the compound, staying on obviously a baseline of testosterone all the time. My theory on this of why I like that better is that it takes time to solidify gains. So if I gain 25 pounds on the scale, okay, obviously some of that's water, some might be a little fat, some is muscle. But to solidify that 25 pounds, it could take, you know, 2 or 3 months before my body has established a new set point and say this 25 added pounds is now permanent muscle or permanent weight on my body. If you just gain 25 pounds and then you go off cycle, you lose a lot of that because your body hasn't accepted that new weight as being permanent. And I think that's the risk of doing, you know, quick blast cycles with a lot of drugs, get a good effect and then go off. Because what happens is you go up and you go down, you go up and you go down. I'd rather gradually go up and stay here for a while and then come down. So you can only do that if you don't do toxic drugs, you avoid orals, and you use more long-actings, injectables. And so that's always been my philosophy on that. You know, you don't have to agree with me, but that seems to have worked really, really well for me.
Take questions again, as mentioned, from our Instagram, from our YouTube community page, from Facebook, and then we will also take questions from our live chat as well. Thank you all for joining. And again, thank you for all the support during Olympia weekend. Brad Brisbane, embarrassing but relevant question. Occasionally after an extreme lift, particularly leg day, I get ED after. It happens to some of my bodybuilder friends as well, running 800 tests a week, 30 tren every other day, and 50 VAR.
You know, Sid, I've noticed a lot of people have been complaining to me about erectile dysfunction lately. And I don't know if it's the water we're drinking or the plastics that we're consuming or what, but getting erectile dysfunction after a severe leg day is very predictable. And I'll tell you why. Because what you're doing is you're traumatizing your nervous system. When you have to squat and put that kind of extreme weight on your body, okay, it's very traumatic. As a matter of fact, I would feel like after I did my workouts on leg day that I was almost like shell shocked. I felt I couldn't relax. I was restless. I couldn't sit down. I didn't know what to do with myself. I almost needed like to take something to relax myself. And that's because I would train my legs so hard that it would actually traumatize the nervous system. And how do you traumatize the nervous system? Well, how do nerves talk to each other? How do nerves and muscles talk to each other? They release what's called neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, dopamine, acetylcholine. There's a whole host of the ones that you can release. When you train really hard legs, you exhaust a lot of these neurotransmitters. And what happens is now the nerves can't communicate with each other after the workout's over. And that's really when we say we're in the gym and we got muscle failure. Muscles don't fail. The neurotransmitters that are telling the nerves how to talk to the muscles, those things fail. You run out of them a little bit, or you can run short on them. And so you feel fatigued. You feel mentally fatigued. You might feel like your nervous system is not communicating well with itself. And it's like almost like you have some kind of like trauma, like you've been traumatized by something. And that happened to me a lot when I would do back and when I would do legs, especially if I trained super hard and intense. And the best thing you can do is try to sleep. Sleep helps the nervous system recover. It helps the neurotransmitters replenish themselves. And so what I would do after like a leg workout is a lot of times I couldn't eat food. I would go home and guzzle it like a post-workout shakedown. And I would go take a nap for like anywhere from like 20 minutes to like an hour. And when I would get up, I would feel like 1,000 times better. And usually that's when my appetite would come back and I'd be able to eat some food and I wouldn't be so shaky at that point. But that's completely normal. That happens a lot. And you know what? If it's happening to you, it probably means you're training really hard, which is good. So, these questions are excellent questions. A lot of these questions come in on the Dave Palumbo Experience app. If you guys haven't subscribed, as Sid mentioned, it's $29 a month. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. You get all my videos, all my writings I've ever done in one place, all my protocols, off-season pre-contest, drug cycles, detoxification, everything's there. We put up a workout every week, and I do a Q&A video, just like I'm doing now, Ask Dave, exclusively for the app members. Plus, I answer everyone's questions in an open forum on the app so everyone can see everyone's questions and everyone's answers. It's a great learning experience. We have a ton of members. You guys have supported that app, and that's why I put so much effort into it. And I want to thank you guys for subscribing.
Let's take one from our YouTube community. Why is nobody talking about Andrew Jacked being robbed again? What was your thoughts as far as Andrew Jacked and the placing that he received? Top 5.
Right. Well, I mean, anyone who places top 5 at the Olympia received a good placing. It was a very competitive show. Let's look at the people who beat him. Hadi beat him. Hadi was second. Shredded, right? Obviously a little flat on prejudging, but night show, really good. Samson, big, hard. He's Mr. Olympia. I mean, he deserved to beat Andrew. Derek was way harder than Andrew. A little more complete too, even though he had some issues. Martin Fitzwater, in my mind, should have been third place. He should have beat Derek. He's coming on with a storm, raging, and Andrew finished exactly where he should have. Andrew's conditioning could have been a little better. His posing is not good, very amateurish looking. He's not executing the mandatory poses to show off what he has to offer. He's losing points essentially by not being able to display his physique the way he should. It happened to Paul Dillette his whole career. Now Andrew's a much better poser than Paul Dillette, but Dillette knew the poses. He just was very awkward when he would hit the poses. Andrew has got to get a posing coach like a Chris Cormier or someone like that to sit and work with him for months and months and months and figure out how to position his body on stage to show off that beautiful physique. He's got the best abs in the business. His front double bicep is arguably the best, but he doesn't do anything with his legs. They just kind of like two lumps laying there. So I think Andrew was his own worst nightmare. I think that, could he have been a little drier? Yeah, maybe. He seemed to be coming on at the end of prejudging and looking better and better and better. I think he might have been a little flat initially, but, he still was good enough for 5th place. If his posing would have been better, he could have been as high as 2nd place. So I think that Andrew has stuff to work on. I think he can still add another 10 pounds of muscle to that frame because his legs are just barely there. They need to be a little bigger in my mind. I think 5th place was really good for him, and I think he's in a good position for next year for sure.
So we're never going to get the actual answer to this question because he just retired from bodybuilding competition altogether this past weekend. But if CBum didn't retire and he went to the open bodybuilding, can his genetics help him compete with guys like a Derek or Hadi?
It's tough because we don't see him standing next to these guys. I think he would look a little on the, I wouldn't want to say skinny. I think he would be too small. So while his structure would be really beautiful, and I think he would certainly place top 10 at the Olympia, because I think he's got a really nice physique. I think he would be outside. His back is not up to the open guys. His arms are kind of weak a little bit, but he flows well. And in the classical sense, he's the epitome of what we look for in classic. He's the Corey Everson, of the men's classic physique class. And his body flowed so well, and that's why he would beat guys that potentially you can make a case that Mike Sommerfeld was a better bodybuilder than Chris Bumstead. He was more complete for sure. He had better legs than him. He had just a small waist. He was a better bodybuilder, but it's not a bodybuilding class. It's classic physique, and Chris had a better classic physique than Sommerfeld, and that's why Chris won that show. In the open, I think Chris would place, but I don't think he would have to add 25 pounds to his physique to be a dangerous open guy. And I just think that that's not something that interests him, and that's why he never wound up doing the Open. It was nice to speculate what he could do, but had he done it and placed, let's say he would have placed ninth at the Olympia, which would have been good if he could have done that. I think he would have been disappointed. His fans would have been disappointed, and the mystique of Chris Bumstead would have gone into the toilet bowl. Now, on another note, Sid, do we want to talk about the contest prediction contest that we had? I think we have some new results in. No.
Yeah, so this is full transparency, and I was going to announce this on Instagram as well. What happened is this: if you've ever used Google Forms, and that, again, for full transparency, is the platform that we used for this contest. They have a function, right? So once you have all the results or whatever, all tabulations, you literally press a button that'll open up results in Google Sheets. Now, for whatever reason, between that and the function of releasing scores, we're getting technical issues. So because of that, what I had in that view, and which is what we announced prematurely, was not the correct scores. I went in the back end of the forums, downloaded the entire CSV, got a more thorough, holistic view of everything there. And again, this is going to be all for display, but we now have the correct results. So those winners will be announced shortly. So my apologies for those that entered and I guess were announced as winners, or those who came, messaging us saying that, well, I thought I had a higher score and everything like that. You probably did. So again, my apologies for that. For whatever reason, the back end for Google was just not, publishing the correct results. We do have the correct results, and we will publish that. And for full transparency, we will show exactly who their picks were. So again, if there's any questions or any controversy, you're able to see exactly what they put down and, just be able to tabulate yourself. But again, we did this in all fairness. So there's no shady stuff behind the scenes. We don't know any of the contestants, so it's not we're favoring anyone. There were certainly no influencers joining that we're trying to give them the prize, whatever the case is, nothing like that. So again, we're going to clean this up. We'll announce the winners and we'll show their exact picks just so there is no question as far as, the full transparency nature of this contest. So, but we're going to do that in the next couple of days.
The funny thing is that the way we discovered it was that Sid saw that I actually got a higher score than the winners that we announced.
Yes. So in that initial readout, it showed Dave had like 25 points or something very low. And I was kind of like, all right. Oh, no, 21 points, actually. 21 points. Yeah. So, but no, he actually had a higher total, even though he didn't fully complete the form, even though he's the first one that got a form. But
I was too lazy. Yeah. All right. Next question.
All right, moving on now. So again, we're sticking with the Olympia theme, and this is it's a good question because this is one that we've kind of talked about for the last few years, right? Really, ever since Phil Heath, we've wondered out loud whether there is anyone that can go on any sort of a dynastic run. Do you see anyone on the current Olympia stage or somebody that is still coming up the ranks as someone who could go a few years with that Olympia title?
I think Samson can do it. I think if Samson keeps improving from year to year, which I think he has been improving from year to year, I think we expected too much from him initially, like last year, the year before that, because he had such a beautiful structure. He put on so much muscle, but the muscle wasn't mature yet. And I think it's getting more mature. He's dieting harder. He's getting leaner. I suspect that he's going to improve for the next anywhere. It could be 3 to 5 years. We might see improvements for that many years in a row. And if he continues to get better, harder, more muscle maturity, he can go on a run and win 5 or 6 of them, I think. The person who I think is the two people I think who can be challenge him would be Andrew Jack if he can get his act together and work on that posing routine, work on, perfecting his body, bringing up a little bit more, some of those legs a little bit more. And I love Martin Fitzwater, man. I'm a big fan of his. I love his physique. He's got width. He's got a back. He's got great legs. I think he could be like another Jay Cutler to Samson's Ronnie Coleman, although I don't know if I would put either one of them in the category that I just mentioned, but potentially, So I think Martin is going to be a guy to watch out for. I think that he will give guys like Hadi and Derek a really, really tough run for their money next year. I could potentially beat both of those guys. And I think he will be challenging Samson at the top of the Olympia stage because this guy is that good. So watch out for Andrew. Watch out for Martin next year. And then, of course, you got guys like Labrada coming up and improving, by leaps and bounds. There's a lot of good guys that can come up. But I think that at this point, if I had to put my money on a guy to make a 3, 4, 5 Olympia run, it would be Samson Dauda.
We mentioned Hadi, and obviously, look, when it comes to Hadi Choopan, you see how passionate his fans are. You see how passionate a lot of bodybuilding fans are because they appreciate the level of conditioning, the graininess that he brings to the stage consistently. Now, again, whether or not you found flaws in any other aspects of his physique, he's been the most consistent bodybuilder ever since he broke out onto the stage, right? 2019, third place.
Yeah.
2020, the fourth place, and that was because he arrived from Iran like 48 hours before prejudging. Obviously winning it in 2022, and now back-to-back runner-up finishes. But the question is, do you see Hadi Choopan ever hoisting the Sandow Trophy again?
It's a tough question. I'll tell you why. Because Samson beat Hadi, and Hadi was almost at his best on Saturday night. Friday he was flat. Okay, he was a little off. I understand that, but Samson did beat him on Saturday too, and Hadi was pretty damn good on Saturday. He wasn't as good as he was at the Arnold, but he was close to that. So I think at this point, since Samson now is in the driver's seat, in a sense, being Mr. Olympia, I think there's going to have to be a drastic mistake or something's going to have to happen to Samson for Hadi to beat him again. Like it's not like Derek and Hadi, like where they were so close. Samson is a lot better than Hadi because of his height, his width, his size difference. So Hadi would have to Samson would have to really screw up big time for Hadi to beat him. Could it happen? Of course. Dexter beat Jay Cutler, right? In 08, and he had never lost to Jay. I mean, Jay had never lost to him in recent memory, but Jay came in off and Dexter beat him. It's a similar situation that Hadi's always there. He's always in shape. Samson has a bad day, gets sick or something like that. Hadi can certainly win. But if Samson puts his mind to it, I don't think that Samson can lose if he's close to his best or at his best. So I would never say Hadi can never be Mr. Olympia because I think that he absolutely can because he's so consistent. He might compete in another 5, 6, 7 years for all we know. So there could be a year where he's in there and then, someone falls off a little bit and he moves in. So if the betting line would say no, but I think that the reality of bodybuilding is that no one's ever at their best all the time. And so the door is always open.
So before we went live, we were talking about, I'm not going to mention the name, we were talking about a bodybuilder who, a very close person to him, told me that they were very disgruntled with their coach, and that, they could potentially be on the market. So I asked Dave, Dave, would you be interested? He's like, yeah, maybe. I mean, with that kind of a thing, he's not going to go chase anyone that if they want to talk, huge 285 at AOL.com, whatever. But anyway, here's a parallel conversation to have. If Nick Walker came to you for advice, not as a coach, just whatever advice,
right,
what would you tell him about staying in the sport if he wants to compete again? Says that he has so much potential and hopes things can work out for him.
Yeah, it's good. It's a very valid question, and I've had obviously a lot of experience, and I've gone through. I've competed, and I'm retired. And looking back, I think that Nick Walker has to be Nick Walker. I think it's important for him to remember this. He can't be Flex Wheeler. He can't be Hadi Choopan. He can't be Derek. He has to be Nick Walker. That means he has to be big, freaky, and hard. And that he cannot try to play this, I want my waist 2 inches smaller game, because it's going to make his legs 2 inches smaller and it's going to make his upper body 2 inches smaller, maybe more. It doesn't work. I tried it at one point. I brought my waist down 2 inches back in 96. But my legs came down too, and they lost some of that wow. And that's what made Dave Palumbo a freak, right? Those big freaky legs with the glutes and quads and hamstrings. You can't give up your strength. His strength is that he's a big mass monster freakazoid. Okay, if you want to say it like it is, and he has to be that guy on stage. And it doesn't matter if his waist is bigger than other people. It doesn't matter if his taper is not as good as other people. He beats people because of that freak factor. Marcus Rule is like that too. He has a good physique, Nick, but don't try to compare yourself to, and make your waist as small as Derek's or Martin's. You're not going to be, that's not you. You have to outmass people and outfreak them. And once he figures out that he can only be who he is, and that's all he can do, he's going to be in a much better place mentally, and he's not going to give a shit what people think. He's going to go up there and give the fans what they want. They want to see a big freak monster, and that's who he is. Be who you are, Nick, because that's going to yield you your best placings. I can guarantee it.
So we're getting actually a lot of good, again, Olympia-related questions, questions basically about what just took place this past weekend. Do you believe that the judges have finally said enough of just conditioning that wins a Mr. Open Olympia, and they have gone back to the, quote, wow factor winning the Open? Olympia, like size and overall mass muscle and great shape like it used to be. I personally believe if you have just been judged on conditioning, because that's all anyone ever talks about, you might as well be in classic physique because they are all in perfect condition, but no wow factor. We talked, Dave, about this Olympia perhaps being a quote unquote referendum Olympia. And even though direction has been disproven over and over again, do you feel as if they did just that in terms of rewarding the wow factor of Samson Dauda?
No, I don't believe that. I think that Samson last year had a lot of wow factor to him, and you could have given him the Olympia, but he didn't have the conditioning. He was softer last year, and so he came in third. This year, he was dramatically better. Samson doesn't need Hadi conditioning to win the Olympia. He needs Samson conditioning to win the Olympia. That means he needs to be in shape for his physique, which is what he was. He had his glutes were there, his hamstrings were there. He wasn't carved out like Hadi is, but he doesn't have that type of physique. And he doesn't need to be carved out like Hadi to win Olympias because he's bigger, rounder, and more impressive than the guys that are super shredded like Hadi and Derek. And so he did what he had to do for Samson to be his best. That was his best look at that particular point in time. If you try to be, and it goes back to what I just said about Nick, if you try to be something that you're not, if he would have gone to chase conditioning like Hadi had, he might have lost too much size and he might have lost some of his wow. So it was a nice blend and balance of exactly what he needed to show off. The judges judge what's up there. We've said it a million times. If super freaky conditioning is the name of the day, like what happened at the Arnold this year, Hadi wins. If you've got a guy who's more impressive because he's bigger, rounder, taller, wider, and he's got good enough conditioning for himself, his physique, then he's going to win. The judges judge what's the best physique up there. And for certain people, it's one way, and other people, it's another way. I had to be inside out, Dave Palumbo shredded if I wanted to do my best because my physique didn't look as good when I was just bigger and fuller because I don't have the best shape. So if you don't have the best structure, you got to come in ultra retardedly, I don't know if that's an appropriate word anymore, but ridiculously shredded. And that's what Nick needs to do. He doesn't have to worry about his structure. He has his structure is what it is, coming big and freaky. Samson did what he had to do. Hadi knows what he's got to do. He's got to come in shrink wrapped inside out because he's only so tall and only so wide. Same thing with Derek. Martin is still a work in progress. He can keep adding more size to his physique, and he's going to still get more and more impressive, but he's bringing in crazy conditioning on his physique. So he's got the size, the structure, and he's got the conditioning. Obviously, the more boxes you can check off, as Milos would say, the better you're going to place.
Let's take more of a PED-related question from McDost. Cruising almost 3 years now. When I start PCT now with your protocol you already mailed me, thanks for that. How long does it take, or how long did it take on average for most guys you helped in the past?
Well, a good time period to go off and clean out, to reset your receptors, resensitize those androgen receptors, and detoxify yourself, to me, is always 8 to 10 weeks. Okay, 8 weeks on the minimum. 10 weeks is usually adequate to get the job done. If you want to stay off a little longer, that's up to you. But 8 to 10 weeks is ideal. The first 4 weeks of that is going to be PCT, 2 weeks of HCG, 2 weeks of Clomid. And I usually have my guys stay on some Testolize, 3 pills twice a day to keep estrogen and DHT minimized. And that works great. And then, get through that 8 to 10 weeks off and then go back on cycle, and you will see your body respond like it's never responded before.
What was the I don't know if you've ever heard this before. I stopped tren months ago, but still have some leakage coming out of my nipples. Why is that?
Trenbolone can raise a hormone known as prolactin. And prolactin-induced gynecomastia, there's estrogen-induced gynecomastia, which is typically what most people get. But if your prolactin's too high, it can make the glands, if you have glands there, secrete mucousy secretions. If you were a girl, during, and you had a baby, it would be milk coming out of there. Right? That's essentially what it is. It's a lactation thing. Prolactin is what causes the lactation in women. It's what causes lactation, a mucousy lactation in men. So if you're very sensitive to trenbolone or DECA, it can raise your prolactin levels, and that can cause that what we call prolactin-induced gynecomastia, which causes discharge. I know you said you stopped the trenbolone several weeks prior. You still may have high prolactin levels. I would go for blood work if you do. You can take Dostinex, also known as cabergoline. You can take a 0.5 milligram 2 to 3 times a week, and that will reduce your prolactin levels and solve that problem.
If no insulin or GH, do you think today's bodybuilders would still look like the 80s competitors? So I guess he's blaming insulin and GH. Your thoughts, I guess, if you were to take those two out of the equation?
Well, you'd have to take all the other peptides out of the equation too, IGF-1 and growth hormone releasing peptide. And, there's so much more technology today. I think the guys would still be bigger. I think the training is better. I think the mental barrier that you can actually get that big has been removed. I think the nutrition information is better about eating higher protein than they used to eat back then, essential fatty acids. I just think we have much more knowledge. So even minus the GH and minus the insulin, I think the bodies would still be a lot bigger than they were in the 80s.
We're getting some... Do PEDs make your sexual preference change? Have you ever seen anything like that? No? Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
What's that?
I didn't hear the question.
No. Do PEDs make your sexual preference change?
Not mine, that's for sure. I don't know.
Does injectable D-bol, does it bypass the liver?
It doesn't bypass it. It bypasses that first run. In other words, when you orally ingest anything, it has to go through the liver, right? Because it goes through your digestive tract. If you inject it, it avoids what we call first pass. So it only goes through the liver once. So yes, it becomes less toxic because of that.
Primobolan, is there a dosage that you prefer in terms of stacking it with test? He's trying to figure out what to add to the cycle. So just again, Primobolan, is there a desired, or is that a homework assignment with test?
No, I think that I always used 100 milligrams 2 to 3 times a week of Primobolan, but I didn't rely on Primobolan alone to be the anabolic that's going to build muscle. So you're combining it with testosterone, you're combining it usually with something else. So, let's say you did testosterone 250 milligrams 3 to 4 times a week. You did EQ, 200 milligrams twice a week, and then you added, 200 or 300 milligrams of Primobolan a week. That would be a nice cycle. Testosterone and Primobolan alone is not that strong. I'm assuming if you're using testosterone, you're trying to build a lot of muscle, So adding Primobolan, which is pretty weak, it's like adding Winstrol, is not going to really do it on its own. And you don't want to have to take a ton of it because it's expensive. So I would say stay with 300 milligrams a week, but then add another anabolic like DECA or EQ or Trenbolone or something like that.
We've heard about Levroni's diet of fish and vegetables leading into a show. Angry Vet wants to know tuna and water to get shredded. He says he's on that diet, spin bike an hour a day, 9.5 weeks out till show.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme. There's no fat in tuna essentially. So you're basically just eating protein. When you eat protein exclusively with no fats or carbs in it, probably 50% of the protein you eat gets converted into carbs. So your body will, via gluconeogenesis, will turn the amino acids into glucose so that your body has a fuel source. So you need to eat a fuel source. When you have like protein, like whether you're eating chicken or you're eating fish or you're eating eggs, you need to have a fuel source. Otherwise, if the body doesn't have a fuel source, it will turn the protein that you're eating into the fuel source, into carbs. And we don't want that, right? So like when I give people my ketogenic diet, I give them, let's say, whole eggs, because the yolks have fat in them. So your body can use the fat for fuel. I'll give them chicken with, avocados or nuts, almonds, because the fat source would become the fuel source. If you're eating like low carbs, you can do, like maybe, 35 grams of rice, 35 grams of carbs from rice with 7, 8 ounces of chicken breast or something like that. Now your rice is the carb source, is the fuel source, and your body can use the protein for protein. But if you just ate just the chicken without the rice, okay, without anything else, your body's going to convert some of that chicken into carbs anyway. You're going to lose that protein. It's an inefficient process, and it's not smart. It's not a smart way to go. So even Levroni, when he would eat his fish and vegetables, the vegetables had some carbs in them. I mean, not a lot, but he would do broccoli and cauliflower, and there would be some carbs. Plus, he's a genetic freak. He was on a good amount of drugs, so he wasn't going to lose muscle. But you always have to think protein plus fuel source. What's the fuel source going to be? Is it going to be very low carbs from vegetables? Is it going to be moderate carbs from like rice or potatoes? Or is it going to be no carbs and we're going to give the body fat as a fuel source and do a ketogenic diet? You have to determine that.
Let's take another live question from our audience. Again, you mentioned Andrew Jacked as being maybe the biggest potential threat to a Samson dynasty. Well, Truth Seeker wants to know if you think Samson and Derek could be the modern day era Ronnie and Jay, but he does go on to say that he thinks Samson's going to win multiple Olympia titles.
Well, I said that I think that earlier in the show, if you remember, I said that I think Martin and Samson could be the Jay-Ronnie combination, because I think Hadi's going to get a little too old at some point. I'm sure he's going to stick around. He's always going to be very dangerous, probably well into his 40s, late 40s. I just think he has that kind of physique that has good staying power. But I think that Martin is going to be, in the next 2 years, is going to get to a level that's above everyone. And Samson's going to get to a level above everyone. And I hope Andrew makes it there as well and has the mindset for doing it, because I don't know, his mindset hasn't been tested yet, really. Samson's has, Martin's has, and Martin should have beat Nick Walker at the New York Pro, as far as I'm concerned. So this guy is tough as nails. He came back to the Olympia even better. So I think you're going to see Martin and Samson battling it for several years from now.
I'm taking this one because he's asked this like 3 or 4 different times. And again, it is one that you've answered before, but we are fielding a live audience, so I'm sure we're getting a lot of new people. And again, I think this is a cool weekly format that I think we're going to test a little bit more. This is post-Olympia, and for anyone that was at the Olympia, or if you've ever been to an Olympia, when you get back from the Olympia, you're deadbeat exhausted. You're catching up on work.
I can't even.
You're probably sick like I am. So, obviously, we're doing things a little differently. Usually we record the show Wednesday afternoon, but we had been toying with the idea of going live. This is seemingly going well in terms of how many people we are fielding live. So we may continue this next week. But again, if you had to go back in time, what bodybuilding wise, what would you have done differently for your own career?
I don't know. I always tell people don't have any regrets. Never think back and say I should have done something differently, because first of all, there's nothing you can do about the past. All you can really do is focus on the future. And it's an exercise in futility to say, oh, if I would have only done this, where would I be today? I don't know if I would. Even when I think about, the fact that I had to go to jail for 5 months, I mean, it changed my perspective on what I was doing, and it allowed me to move into the next stage of my career, which was to start my own nutrition line and to start, working as a social media guy, which wasn't even social media then. It was really, launching websites first for muscle development and then moving to RXMuscle. So I think everything happens the way it's supposed to. It's like you kind of like write the script of your life before you're born, and you put certain obstacles in the way so that it can change the direction that you're going to and keep you on the path to where you're really supposed to be going. Because we really don't know where we're going. I don't know where I'm supposed to be going. I just have to look out for the signposts and follow the signposts and go where they go. Just when you think you figured it out, another opportunity could present itself and take you in a different direction. And so I kind of try to avoid that. Well, if I wouldn't have done this, maybe I would have achieved that. So I have no regrets in my life. I mean, I know other people they might have made big mistakes and stuff like that. But even the mistakes that I made, I think were meant to be made so that I can get to the place that I am right now. And that's really all you can do. It's very destructive, I think, to go back and to sit there and hit your head against the wall about all the things that you could have done differently, because you can't do anything. The only thing you can do is change right now what you're doing. You're sitting on your ass, feeling sorry for yourself. You're out of shape. You haven't gone to the gym, and you're feeling bad for yourself and sulking. Get your lazy ass off the couch, okay? Eat a meal, get to the gym and train, and do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And you know what? Before you know it, you're going to be out of that funk and you're going to be back on the path to where you're supposed to be going. Where is that supposed to be going place? Only you know, and you have to find out. And that's what's exciting about life. You don't know where that is.
We'll take a couple more questions. Akshay Pandey, good usual contributor to this show, so we appreciate his support. I'm confused between omega-3 and fish oil. I read the label of one of the supplements. It said fish oil 1000 mg and omega-3 250 mg. What is that supposed to mean?
That's a good question. Fish oil, okay, which would be the fatty content of the fish, right, that they can somehow distill off of there, right? They cut it off, they melt it down, and they distill it, and they clean it up. Fish oil has multiple sources of fat in it. It's not just omega-3 fats. It's got other fats in there as well. It's predominantly omega-3 fats, and that's where we get a good amount of it. But when I put fish oil in my Omega-Lyze formula, in that 3,000 milligram serving per day, okay, you're getting a certain amount of EPA, and a certain amount of DHA, which is the omega-3 intermediates that are activated and actually can do something in the body. And it's a percentage of the fish oil. So 100% of the fish oil is not DHA and EPA. There's other things in there. Just like my macadamia nut oil that I sell, that is it's a great product. You could cook with it. It's got a high smoke point. It tastes buttery. It's very good for your heart. It's got a ton of monounsaturated fats in there. It also has omega-3 and 6 fats in there. Not a lot. And they're actually balanced in 1-to-1 ratio, which makes the oil very stable. But the oil is predominantly monounsaturated fats. It does have some polyunsaturated fats, but it's predominantly. So fish oil is the same way. The oils in fish are predominantly omega-3s if they're wild-caught fish. If it's a wild-caught fish like salmon, anchovies, those type of fish, mackerel. But there are other oils in there as well. So if anytime you buy a essential fatty acid supplement, it's going to give you what the source of the oil is, and then what the composition of those oils are, what fats are in there within that one big conglomerate that's called fish oil. I also have evening primrose oil in my Omega-Lyze formula. And within the evening primrose oil, there's a certain amount of CLA, and then there's a certain amount of GLA in there. And you'll see that breakdown on the label, because it's not just one oil. I hope that explains it.
We'll take one more. So we talked about, again, Samson and his prospects of going on a dynastic run. I mean, it's crazy to think just a couple of months ago, we were at the Arnold Classic and you talked about the conditioning that he needed to bring in order to stand a chance against Hadi. You just saw what he brought to the Olympia stage. What does Samson have to bring up? And maybe just, again, in your words, just another level of conditioning, or in terms of body parts, in order to dominate next year and perhaps years going forward?
Well, I mean, let's face it. He won this year. So if he came back and looked just like he did this year, he'd probably win again next year. So he doesn't have to do a lot. He needs to bring maybe a little bit better conditioning. I'm sure he knows what body parts he wants to bring up and improve upon. I think his glutes can be a little bigger. He's a big guy. He's got big, massive legs. His glutes are a little on the small side. So I'd like to see him do some more squats to bring the glutes up to match. You don't have to be Ronnie Coleman glutes, but they should match the rest of his big, huge legs. His back is really good, but maybe get even a little more width on that back. Get those lower erectors to pop a little bit more. maybe do some more deadlifts and some more lower back type exercise, one-arm rows, so that when he pulls his back, his lats back, you can see those real thick lower lats like Kai Green has. It's a lot of quality changes. He doesn't need a lot. He's better off doing nothing rather than making his physique worse. You know what I mean? So he should really focus on quality changes. Whatever he's doing, the way he trains, he shouldn't change it. A lot of guys sometimes say, well, I need quality changes. I'll just lighten the weights up and do more machine work. No. That'll ruin his physique. Whatever he does, whatever he's done to get his physique looking like it does, he should not abandon that. He should just make some quality improvements moving forward at this point. He doesn't need that much more size.
The funny thing is, as you're saying quality improvements, all I'm thinking to myself right now is Samir Bannout saying the word quality over and over again. I need more quality. But anyway, this has been a lot of fun, and I think we're going to do this going forward. I think we're going to bring back some of the elements that we had in previous years when we used to do Ask Dave Live. Best question of the day, the best I hate this show. And we'll come up with some other inside jokes as well. It was a lot of fun. And again, it's always fun interacting live with the RXMuscle community. So we're going to do this going forward, not at Wednesday nights, but earlier on in the day. We'll figure out a time that's good in terms of the live audience, and we're going to be able to, get the max yield out of the show for us and for you, for the audience, in terms of getting max value in terms of the questions that you want asked as well.
Samson's wife, coach of the year.
No, well, look, there are a lot of people out there that, owe a hearty apology to her and to the concept of, again, not knowing her ability as a coach. And certainly she had the last laugh. Samson had the last laugh. He is Mr. Olympia, and they go home. I wanted to ask you because, we talked about, and we'll end on this note. We talk about when Arnold made that announcement, right? It was right after Hadi was crowned the Arnold Classic champion. There's confetti falling from the sky. Everybody had their camera phones out, right? So again, keep in mind, everybody had their camera phones out. Everybody's recording the moment, and that's when he dropped next year we're going to increase to $500,000. This year, and again, you and Chris and anybody that you spoke to wondered if the Olympia was going to have a response. When, and if so, when are they going to have a response? And I mean, I think all of us it slipped out of our minds since that was even a conversation. Jake Wood, literally as they're about to crown Mr. Olympia, drops an absolute masterclass, $600,000 for first place and $250,000 for second place. And again, when all the camera phones are out, and literally in terms of the global bodybuilding audience, everyone's eyes and ears locked in on that very moment, and that's when they made the announcement.
Isn't it interesting that everyone had their camera phones out, was videotaping, except you and me, because we were not allowed to video because we would have lost our press passes? I find that kind of humorous, don't you find that? Everyone else in the whole arena was videotaping except you and I, because we didn't want to lose our press passes. Dan, I think we need to reevaluate the video protocol. I'll say this though. Yeah. Jake definitely, that was a great thing that Jake did. The only thing that was kind of weird was they didn't really announce how much the other class, like every time someone was given a championship, they didn't announce what the checks were for. So I don't know how much anyone else got. All we know is that the men's open second place guy got $250 and the open winner got $600. There was not a single mention of any other money for any of the other classes, from the women to all the other men's categories. I don't know what the reason for that was. I speculated this on Heavy Muscle when we filmed the other day, but I'm wondering when we're going to hit $1 million for the men's open. And I think that it's going to happen within the next couple of years. The question is, who will do it first, Arnold or Jake? I think it's going to be, that's going to be whoever does the first $1 million first place prize is going to make headlines for sure, though.
That's going to do for this episode of Fast Dave, live episode of Fast Dave. I think we're going to do this again next week, earlier on in the day, Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time. But again, we thank all of you for asking your questions, for joining us live, and for, again, the constant fun that it is interacting with you guys in a live setting. Obviously, a lot of post-Olympia questions. Next week, we'll probably go back to a little bit more in terms of the supplementation, diet, and training aspect. But again, this is your weekly forum. So any question that you have for Dave Palumbo, this is where you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions. And like I said, I think we're going to try to go live with this and see how this works out over the course of the next upcoming weeks. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.
Cool.